My boyfriend cheated with his first love, and I became the other woman. Since you won't play fair, don't expect me to apologize? You'll have to speak on your knees, you're standing too tall for me to hear. You want to mess with me? You should know your place. I was having a blast shopping at the shopping mall when I turned and saw my boyfriend's back. He was holding hands with a girl, looking very sweet. He was cheating on me. I rushed over and yanked the girl towards me. Slap. My boyfriend slapped me first. I clutched my face, my eyes wide with shock. He hit me for this vixen? Then, he pulled the girl behind him. He was protecting her. I got even angrier and lunged forward, wanting to yank the other woman's hair. My boyfriend blocked me, and the girl peered out from behind him, smiling triumphantly at me. That's when I noticed she looked somewhat like me. Maybe a few points of resemblance. My head was spinning. What was going on? A crowd gathered, starting to whisper. Then the other woman stepped out and yelled loudly, pointing at me. We're getting married soon. Stop bothering us. You're the other woman, acting so self-righteous. Suddenly, the tide turned. The other woman dares to come here and lord it over me? Gross. Isn't the other woman just a slut? Someone who destroys other people's happiness. What is this world coming to? What's wrong with young girls these days? Are your eyes just for show? I'm clearly the victim. Why are you all talking about me? The other woman looked smug, then hooked her arm through David Miller's and walked away. I wasn't going to let this slide. I took out my phone and dialed my detective friend's number. Jessica, I need everything you can find on David Miller by the end of today. By evening, she came to my place with a stack of documents. David Miller's first love was back in the country. He had relentlessly pursued her in college, while she remained distant. Scumbags like him always a desire to conquer. The harder someone is to get, the more they crave them. As they say, the ones you can't have are always the most tempting. David Miller had always been infatuated with Sarah Johnson, showering her with brand-name bags, clothes, watches, never the same thing twice. Jessica opened her phone gallery, found a photo of Sarah Johnson, and handed it to me. This was the other woman I ran into today. Jessica then pulled out a stack of documents detailing all sorts of things related to David Miller. The most legendary figure among them was his father, Robert Miller. Started his own business at 20. By 25, he was among the top 10 in the real estate industry. At 30, he was a real estate mogul, widowed at 32 and never remarried. The key to getting back at David Miller was his father. Striking at the root was the only way to solve the problem. But where to start? She pulled out a photo. It was Robert Miller and his deceased wife. This woman, she looked so much like me. It seemed fate had delivered an opportunity. What if I became David Miller's stepmother? Controlling him would be effortless, wouldn't it? This plan is excellent. First, a chance encounter, then cultivate feelings, then get married right away. And after that, the torment of David Miller would begin. The next evening, I styled myself after his deceased wife's look, makeup and clothes, and waited in my car early. As soon as Robert Miller's car appeared, I followed behind. At the intersection, I hit the gas and crashed right into him, bringing his car to a stop. Time to strike. I got out of the car, tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, and went over to the driver's side. I am so sorry, sir. I'm a new driver. How much will it cost? I'll pay. Then, I pretended to glance casually towards the back seat. Robert Miller was focused on the document in his hand, showing no reaction even after being rear-ended. He was so composed. I had to speak to him first. Sir, I apologize for disrupting your schedule. My voice was full of regret. The moment he looked up and met my eyes, he froze, his face filled with disbelief. He quickly got out of the car and rushed to my side, grabbing my arm as if afraid I would run away. You. Emily, is that you? The fish had taken the bait. You seem to have mistaken me for someone else. My name is Olivia Davis. Robert Miller then came to his senses and quickly apologized, saying I resembled someone he knew. I thought to myself, his deceased wife, obviously? Oh, really? She must be someone very important to you, then. I looked at him with a calm expression. A gentle breeze blew past, lifting my long hair. Strands brushed against Robert Miller's face. The atmosphere was perfectly set. Time seemed to stop in that moment. It felt a bit like an eternity in a glance. I tilted my head and waved a hand in front of his eyes, startling him back to reality. He invited me to dinner at an Italian restaurant. During dinner, I deliberately steered the conversation towards the person he knew. Perhaps he wanted to confide, so he slowly began to tell me about their story. From meeting, to getting to know each other, to falling in love. Just hearing it, I could feel how happy they must have been. Maybe he hadn't had anyone to talk to about it for all these years. But if it was really like he said, how could he raise a scumbag son like David Miller? Miss Davis, meeting like this must be fate. Could we be friends? An opportunity to take things further, just handed to me. I gladly agreed. For a while after that, we saw each other often. Finally, Robert Miller confessed his affection and wanted to officially pursue me. He promised to treat me well for the rest of his life and make me the happiest woman in the world. Tears welled up, my face full of emotion, and I threw myself into his arms, sobbing, but my lips curled upwards involuntarily. The show was about to begin. Naturally, we began planning the wedding. During this time, Robert Miller mentioned that he wanted me to meet his son. I told him that since I would be his stepmother, it would be better not to meet yet. It might be psychologically difficult for his son to suddenly have a stepmother close to his age. Underneath my words, there was a hint of subtle grievance. Robert Miller was an older man with a younger woman, and on this point, he was at a disadvantage. I leaned against his chest. I'm afraid he won't accept me, but I'm even more afraid of losing you. He held me, gently patting my back to comfort me, and placed a reassuring kiss on my forehead. All right, whatever you say. At the wedding venue, guests were seated. Through the backstage curtain, I had a clear view of the scene in front. David Miller and Sarah Johnson arrived late. He was about to get a new mother. He sat in the audience, his face gloomy. After all, a stepmother posed a risk to the inheritance. The ceremony began. Wearing my designer wedding dress, I slowly walked towards the center of the stage, linked arms with Robert Miller, and wore a look of pure happiness. The moment I turned, David Miller and I locked eyes. He was so startled, he shot straight up from his chair. It's you. Sarah Johnson quickly pulled David Miller back down. She looked just as surprised. Excellent, this was the reaction I wanted. Next, it was my turn to perform. I stumbled back in feigned panic, my high heel catching on the hem of my dress. I nearly fell to the ground. Suddenly, a strong, broad hand wrapped around my waist. It was Robert Miller. He helped me up, his eyes full of concern, asking what was wrong. I was on the verge of tears, my eyes slightly red, but I stammered hesitantly. He stood in front of me, his tall frame shielding me from the guests' view, comforting me and telling me not to be afraid, that he was there. I told him that for some reason, my ex who kept causing trouble had shown up. Maybe he came on purpose, wanting to see me embarrassed. Robert Miller frowned, his face instantly turning serious. If he dares to cause trouble, I'll make sure he doesn't leave in one piece. The ceremony continued. After exchanging rings, the rites were complete. When it came to the toasting part, I claimed I wasn't feeling well and pulled Robert Miller to a room to rest. David Miller followed us. I struck first, pointing at David Miller's nose and yelling angrily, "You scumbag! Why are you still haunting me, trying to ruin my happiness?" I didn't give him a chance to speak. I closed the door and then cried like a wilting flower, shrinking into Robert Miller's embrace. Now he understood everything. David Miller was the scumbag. That evening, back at home, the three of us were at the dinner table. Robert Miller shot a stern glance at David Miller. He told him directly that from now on, I was his stepmother, and he had to respect me and call me mom. David Miller slammed his hand on the table, pointed at my nose, and yelled, "She? You expect me to call her mom? Insolence! Get on your knees." Robert Miller's shout made my heart skip a beat. Watching David Miller's face full of angry reluctance, forced to kneel despite his defiance, I felt incredibly satisfied. I gently patted Robert Miller's chest. "Robert, don't be angry. It's all right, don't let this hurt your relationship with your son because of me." But then I turned away and quietly sobbed, pressing my fingers to the corner of my eyes to force out some tears. Robert Miller saw this and immediately stood up, brutally kicking David Miller, knocking him to the ground. "Call her mom now. Don't make me say it again." David Miller's eyes were wide, his chest heaving. His hands clenched into fists. He looked at his father, then turned to me. Gritting his teeth, he forced out a single word, "Mom." "Yes, dear." I walked over to David Miller and helped him up, pinching his arm hard. "We're family now, no need for formalities. Look how upset you've made your father. Get up and eat." Throughout the meal, Robert Miller and I displayed affection, while David Miller seethed with resentment. After that, I constantly stirred up trouble between father and son. David Miller, with his idiot brain, would always react when provoked. He argued with his father constantly, and their relationship became strained. One day, I received a text message. "Hello, this is Sarah Johnson. Can we meet to talk?" That name sounded familiar. I remembered. Wasn't that David Miller's first love's name? I had been so focused on dealing with David Miller, I forgot to settle the score with her. Since she was offering herself up, I naturally had to see what she was up to. The Daily Grind Cafe in half an hour. After replying, I put on exquisite makeup, donned my jewelry, and chose a pair of 8-inch stiletto heels for the meeting. When I arrived, she was already there. "Auntie, you're here." The person in front of me wore a white dress and looked gentle, quiet, and harmless. If I hadn't known what she was really like, I might have been fooled by her appearance. Oh? That's not a name to just throw around. Am I that old? It turned out David Miller had already proposed to her, and to ensure a smooth time after marriage, she had come early to butter up her future mother-in-law. Sarah Johnson said this, then took out an exquisite box from behind her. She opened it, revealing a limited edition LV bag, probably worth hundreds of thousands. She thought this would buy me off? Was I lacking money now? I wanted revenge. You think a measly bag can erase everything that happened? I looked at her with sharp eyes, staring until she felt a chill. She quickly said she was ignorant before and sincerely wanted to apologize this time. Whatever I wanted, she would do. This acting sweet and innocent, while being manipulative. Was she putting on a show for me? Well, sorry to disappoint, but I specialize in dealing with the manipulative type. I picked up the cup from the table, held it over her head, and then slowly poured it down. The water ran down her hair. She didn't dare make a sound. Sarah Johnson took out a tissue, wiped her face dry, and maintained a smile towards me. Pretty strong-willed, huh? I looked down at my shoes. How did my shoe get dirty? I looked up at her, my eyes full of unspoken meaning. She pursed her lips, asked a waiter for a napkin, and knelt down, but hesitated to act. I lifted my toe and poked her face. Don't force yourself if you don't want to. I prefer a filial daughter-in-law saying this. I started to get up to leave. She quickly grabbed my ankle. Auntie, wait. I'll wipe it now. Then, she carefully wiped it clean bit by bit with the cloth. TSK. For a loser like David Miller, some people really are willing to swallow their pride. Just then, David Miller suddenly appeared. He immediately pulled Sarah Johnson up and shielded her behind him. Olivia Davis, how dare you bully Sarah Johnson? Heh. Another one handing themselves over. I started complaining to him in a soft, gentle voice. My dear son, how can you speak to your mother in such a loud voice? Did your father's words go in one ear and out the other? He violently grabbed the cup and threw the water at me. I used the box lid to block it, and the water splashed back onto both of them. Wow, you have quite a temper. No wonder you needed to cool off. David Miller was furious. He raised his hand to hit me, but Sarah Johnson quickly pulled him back. She was smart enough to know better. Unfortunately, David Miller was an idiot. He shook off Sarah Johnson and raised his hand to slap me. I grabbed his wrist, pulled him forward, and gave him a hard backhand slap. Slap. Instantly, a red handprint appeared clearly on his face. Son, you are so impulsive. How can you RT a family and career like this? I'll talk to your father, perhaps you should slow things down. Sarah Johnson panicked and quickly pulled David Miller, apologizing and saying they were young and didn't know better, asking me to forgive their childish behavior. Apologize? You'll have to speak on your knees, you're standing too tall for me to hear. Sarah Johnson immediately knelt, trying to pull David Miller down with her, but he remained standing straight. My patience is wearing thin. Finally, David Miller knelt down, seething with anger. My son and daughter-in-law are truly filial. They're giving me a grand bow even before the wedding. With that, I turned and walked away gracefully. Since Sarah Johnson was so eager to marry in and enjoy the good life, I decided to give her a hand. After all, it's much easier to get revenge when they're under my nose. At the wedding, David Miller walked down the aisle with Sarah Johnson. I exchanged a glance with someone in the back row, and then he stuck out his foot. Did you think he was going to trip them? Not quite. He stepped on the bride's train. The wedding dress had already been tampered with. A large rip tore through the white dress's train, exposing Sarah Johnson's red underwear to everyone. While the bride is quite traditional, wearing red for the wedding. Look at her figure, quite good. No wonder she could marry into the Miller family. Oh dear, I can't bear to watch. How embarrassing. How can the Miller family show their faces after this? Sarah Johnson was frantic, tears streaming down her face, smearing her makeup. With raccoon eyes, she ran backstage. Robert Miller was so furious, he ended the wedding right there. That evening, David Miller and Sarah Johnson knelt in front of the sofa, completely silent. Robert Miller grabbed a cup and threw it at David Miller's head. He was instantly bleeding from the head, soaked in tea. You wicked son. Look at the wife you married. You. D completely shamed the Miller family. David Miller didn't dare move. Sarah Johnson used a handkerchief to wipe and stop the bleeding on David Miller's wound, crying and apologizing the whole time. Robert Miller looked impatient and snapped at her, telling her women had no place speaking here. Was he including me in that? I looked at him and cleared my throat. That guy realized he had said the wrong thing and quickly put his arm around my shoulder, trying to sweet-talk me into forgiving him. The two kneeling looked utterly incredulous. They probably thought I had cast some kind of spell on Robert Miller. I linked my arm with his and comforted him, telling him not to be angry, that his daughter-in-law was young and it was normal for her to be ignorant. Perhaps I should take it upon myself to properly discipline her? He agreed and ordered David Miller and Sarah Johnson to obey me in this house from now on. From then on, my daily life became especially interesting. I made Sarah Johnson follow the maid and learn to do chores. She had to do everything herself, supposedly to temper her character. When the toilet was clogged, I made her unclog it. A moment later, she ran out gagging. When clothes were dirty, I made her wash them by hand. She washed until her fingers were white, missed dinner, and got nothing to eat. If there was hair on the floor, I made her kneel down and pick up every single strand. When the floor was dirty, I made her mop it over and over. She fell so many times her arms and legs were covered in bruises. I made her learn to cook. When she put vegetables in the hot oil, it splattered, leaving her hands and arms covered in small blisters. David Miller saw all this and finally couldn't take it anymore. He came to me and made a huge scene. At the time, I was lounging on the sofa, watching a revenge movie on the large screen TV. Marrying her didn't mean bringing in a goddess. If she can't handle these little things, maybe you should divorce her. Hearing this, Sarah Johnson quickly put down the soup ladle, untied her apron, and hurried over to kneel beside me and massage my legs. Mom, what are you saying? I may be a bit clumsy, but I'm eager to learn. I'll definitely make you satisfied. The training is showing some results. See? Your wife isn't complaining, so why are you worrying? David Miller's face was as ugly as if he'd eaten dog poop. He was so angry he couldn't speak, the veins on his forehead bulging. I looked down at Sarah Johnson. Daughter-in-law, my feet are a little sore. Go get some water for a foot bath. Yes, Mom, right away. David Miller saw the foot bath basin and Sarah Johnson massaging my feet with her hands. He snapped. He stormed out, slamming the door. That's all the tolerance he has? What a weakling. That evening, a message popped up on my phone. David Miller was starting to dig his own grave. It was a lavish, upscale bar. As soon as I entered, my friend ran over, her face excited. Hurry! You'll miss the show if you're late. Before I could even ask, she grabbed my arm and pulled me along. Suddenly, two pairs of eyes appeared at the door and window of room 104. Let her go. David Miller yelled defiantly. The man with the scar ignored him and continued to hold Sarah Johnson tightly. Seeing his wife on the verge of tears from distress, David Miller's blood boiled. He grabbed a bottle and swung it. But instead, David Miller was hit back, left dizzy and bleeding from the head as the bottle shattered and alcohol sprayed everywhere. The man with the scar smirked and pushed Sarah Johnson out of his arms. He threw a fierce punch, knocking David Miller to the ground. That guy is so hot. My friend exclaimed in admiration. The man crouched down and unleashed a barrage of punches, making David Miller cry out in agony, "Ah! Ah!" His lip was split, his eyes were bruised and swollen, and he lost teeth. On top of the initial bottle hit, his head was split open. Now his face was covered in blood. And that wasn't all. The man with the scar stood up, flicked his finger, and his subordinates surrounded David Miller, beating and kicking him. The continuous screams of pain were incredibly satisfying to listen to. Sarah Johnson was terrified, shrinking back and not daring to move. I guess she didn't expect to provoke someone so ruthless. The man with the scar pulled her with his large hand, and Sarah Johnson fell into his arms. David Miller couldn't make a sound now, his face disfigured. Two lackeys propped him up, forcing him to kneel at the man's feet. This weakling thinks he can steal someone? The man with the scar kicked him aside disdainfully, then roughly yanked Sarah Johnson's shirt open at the chest. Ah! She quickly covered herself with both hands. He was certainly no gentleman. He roughly brushed her hands aside and grabbed Sarah Johnson's wrists with one hand. With the other hand, he brazenly began to grope her chest. The man was skilled with his hands. Sarah Johnson was made so uncomfortable she started to moan. And David Miller? He lay on the ground like a rag doll. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, just watched helplessly as his wife was harassed. He must have been furious and resentful now, right? Without his father, he was nothing. I expected the scene to become NSFW. But the man with the scar actually pushed Sarah Johnson to the ground in disgust. Heh, moaning like that? Wonder how many hands she's been through. He wiped his hands and tossed the handkerchief away in disgust, hitting David Miller right in the face. Then, I saw David Miller's fingers desperately scratching at the floor. Ha ha ha. So satisfying to watch. My friend and I almost burst out laughing, but we managed to hold it in. The man spoke again. A weakling and a slut, a good match. His tone was one of certainty and contempt. If you dare to speak of what happened today, the fish in the river will get fed again. The seemingly casual words were full of threat. With that, he stood up smoothly. My friend and I quickly slipped away. Then, the man with the scar and his followers left. I pretended to pass by the room and glanced inside. Daughter-in-law, what happened to you? My expression was exaggeratedly surprised. I walked over to David Miller and took the cloth off his face. My God. My dear son, you've become a pig's head? My friend quietly gave me a thumbs up, her eyes filled with admiration for my superb acting skills. Do you need me to call the police? At the mention of the police, Sarah Johnson snapped back to reality. No, don't call the police. We're fine, really. She quickly helped David Miller up, ready to leave. Oh dear, if Robert knew about this, he'd probably be angry again, wouldn't he? They froze. David Miller slowly turned and glared at me, gasping out threats. Olivia Davis, I won't let you get away with this. I'd like to see what you can do to me. That day, I went shopping and ducked into the shopping mall restroom. I bent down to wash my hands when a hand holding a handkerchief covered my mouth and nose. I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in an abandoned construction site. I was tied up tightly in a chair, tape over my mouth. Slap. Sarah Johnson's slap was heavy. My right cheek stung immediately. Olivia Davis, now that you're in our hands, don't expect to leave alive. David Miller ripped off the tape covering my mouth and yanked my hair back. Bitch, why aren't you talking? Go ahead and scream. Shout all you want. No one will hear you. No one? I glanced at him and remained silent. From the moment they covered my mouth and nose, I had pressed my personal alarm. My bodyguards had already followed, as I'd arranged. With just one signal from me, they'd be in here to capture you in minutes. For now, I remained still, waiting for the right moment. My silence provoked David Miller even further. He picked up the knife and patted my face with it, his expression somewhat deranged. You used this face to bewitch my father, didn't you? If your face is ruined, he'll definitely kick you out. Saying that, he slashed my left and right cheeks. It hurt so much. David Miller, you lunatic. That sentence instantly enraged him. He suddenly grabbed my neck. Bitch, you're still defiant even at death's door. I stared at him, struggling to utter a few words. Elm Street, 3218. He reeled back as if struck in the soul, staggering away in shock. How did you know about this place? Cough, cough, cough. Suddenly able to breathe, I choked a bit. My neck was covered in red and purple bruises from the strangling. And for that, I have my good friend to thank. She provided that crucial clue. David Miller panicked, cold sweat beading on his forehead. The advantage was shifting to me. What is done in the dark will eventually come to light. Hearing this, David Miller immediately knelt and begged for mercy, crawling over to hug my legs. I was wrong, Mom, please let me go. He was like a dog, wagging his tail and begging for mercy. I can let you go, but what about the injuries on my face? David Miller immediately grabbed the knife and slashed his own face several times, each cut drawing blood. Sarah Johnson was speechless with shock. How had the situation reversed so suddenly? I looked up at her and smiled faintly, then leaned down and whispered to David Miller. David Miller, I hate it when people look like me. Understand? David Miller's hand holding the knife trembled. His brow furrowed, and the veins on his hand bulged. He suddenly stood up, turned, grabbed Sarah Johnson, forced her to the ground, and then swiftly slashed her face several times as well. Sarah Johnson screamed in agony, on the verge of breaking down. David Miller couldn't care less about her. Compared to his own life, a woman was easily discarded. Seeing their ruined faces, I was overjoyed. After he untied me, I casually propped my legs up and leaned back in the chair. Hey, how did the sole of my shoe get dirty? David Miller knelt down and subserviently wiped it back and forth with his sleeve. I lifted the tip of my shoe and raised an eyebrow. Lick it clean. Seeing him hesitate, I kicked him away hard. I walked over to him and dug my finger viciously into his wound. He writhed in pain, blood pouring out. I cruelly pulled my finger out, taking a large piece of flesh with it. Then, I started kicking and stomping on both of them. Just as I was getting into it, my watch received a message, "Boss is here. Entering in 1 minute." I quickly switched gears, stopped what I was doing, and leaned down to David Miller. "Actually, I knew nothing at all. I was just bluffing you." David Miller realized I had tricked him. His eyes turned bloodshot, and he grabbed the knife, lunging at me. "I'll kill you." Robert Miller pushed the door open and saw me collapsing, clutching my wound. "Olivia." When I woke up, Robert Miller was asleep by the bedside. As soon as I stirred, he woke up and quickly helped me sit up against the headboard. I looked at him with a wronged expression, tears flowing down my face involuntarily. "My face is hurt, it hurts so much." Boo-hoo-hoo. With that performance, I couldn't help but crown myself the queen of manipulative types. His face was full of heartache. He kept apologizing, saying things like how much I had suffered. I looked up at him. "What about David Miller? Did the police catch him?" He was silent for a moment, then asked me with a heavy tone if I could let it go. I exploded. I pushed him away. "Robert Miller, in your heart, I'm not as important as your son." Strings of tears rolled over my wounds, making me wince with pain. He panicked. He didn't want to lose me and was willing to give me $300 million in assets. I grabbed a pillow and literally threw him out of the hospital room. $300 million to settle this? Soon after, the butler came in with a document and handed it to me. Blazoned across the top were the words, "Property Transfer Agreement." I opened the agreement. It clearly stated, Robert Miller willingly transferred $300 million in assets under his name to me. His signature was already there. The butler handed me a pen and gestured for me to sign. "All right, I'll sign." This agreement would serve another purpose. After being discharged the next day, I immediately arranged to meet David Miller. As soon as we met, I threw the agreement in his face. He was about to explode, but I stopped him. "Hold on, read what it says first." The more he flipped through it, the uglier his face became, and the more satisfied I felt. $100 million a cut. Tell me, did I lose out? Hearing this, David Miller was so enraged he ripped the agreement to shreds. I picked up a piece of a shred and played with it idly. Tearing it won't do any good. That was a copy. $300 million is already in my account. Hearing this, the veins on David Miller's hands and neck bulged. He crushed the cup in his hand. "Olivia Davis, I'm going to kill you." People are most impulsive when angry, and that's when they fall into traps easily. My bodyguard rushed out and punched David Miller in the face. His nose bled profusely. Immediately following was a kick that sent him crashing into a table behind him. He landed on the floor and couldn't get up. I elegantly tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear and watched coldly as David Miller was beaten. "Break his leg." The bodyguard received the order, pulled out a finger-thick steel rod from the umbrella handle, and advanced towards David Miller step by step. Crack! Ah! David Miller's agonizing scream as his leg was broken echoed through the air. He rolled around, clutching his leg. I walked over to him and looked down at him condescendingly, as if I were looking at a fly. I raised my foot and stepped on his broken leg, grinding down hard. He held in pain. "You wanted to mess with me? You should have known your place." Back at home, I leaned against Robert Miller and told him how I had met David Miller today, wanting to let bygones be bygones, but he had almost strangled me. He quickly pulled me away and examined the strangle marks on my neck. His eyes blazed with fury, and he ordered the butler to go bring David Miller back immediately. "It's all right. I already taught him a lesson. He should learn from it. David Miller's broken leg can be fixed, but I was cut 3 times, and those will scar." Only then did Robert Miller relax. He planned to take me out to dinner. I stopped him and smiled knowingly. "Hold on, I have a gift for you." I took out a small box I had prepared beforehand and handed it to Robert Miller. He seemed surprised. It wasn't a holiday or special occasion, so why a sudden gift? He opened it. Inside was a folded document. He unfolded it to read, and his eyes widened in surprise. "Olivia, I'm not mistaken, am I? You're having a child." I looked at him with shining eyes. "It's our child." He was as happy as a young man. He picked me up and spun me around, making me dizzy. All right, put me down." Robert Miller then set me down and ordered the maid to make me soup to nourish my body. Now, going out for dinner was out of the question. I told him I was going downstairs to watch a movie. He wanted to accompany me, but I sent him back to his study to work. When I went downstairs, I ran into Sarah Johnson on the stairs. "Daughter-in-law, you're about to have a little brother-in-law." I flaunted the pregnancy test results in my hand, looking at her smugly. She chose to ignore me, turning sideways to pass. Aren't you afraid that you and David Miller won't get a single cent of the inheritance? Impossible. She turned and leaned closer. Just then, Robert Miller's figure. He appeared around the corner on the second floor. Here was my chance. I pretended Sarah Johnson pushed me, staggering backwards, pulling her arm as I went. Ah, Olivia. Robert Miller rushed over, but this time, he didn't catch me. Both of us tumbled down the stairs. I clutched my stomach, pretending to be in excruciating pain. Quick, to the hospital. I glanced back at Sarah Johnson. Blood was running down her skirt, but no one noticed. Heh heh. When I saw the pregnancy test stick on her nightstand that day, I started planning this accident. The hospital side was already taken care of. This performance was sure to go well. On the way, I shakily handed the pregnancy test results to Robert Miller. In a weak voice, I begged him to save our child, then fainted. When I woke up, Robert Miller was sitting by the bed. I asked him in a trembling voice, "The baby, is it all right?" His silence was deafening. I broke down crying, clutching my stomach. The baby. He killed my baby. That was my first child. I used all the acting skills worthy of a drama I had learned. Robert Miller was also heartbroken. He gently held me. "Olivia, you're still young. We can have more children." Ha! His tone was exactly like that of someone trying to placate me with empty promises. Where is that bitch Sarah Johnson? I want her to pay for my child's life. Only then did he realize who the real culprit was. He immediately called the butler and told him to bring Sarah Johnson. In the hospital room, she was dragged in, pushed, and fell face down on the floor, still wearing a hospital gown just like mine. At this point, my eyes were red and swollen, bloodshot. As soon as I saw her, I became emotionally agitated and tried to climb out of bed, yelling that I wanted her to pay with my life. This level of derangement was exhausting to act. My throat was hoarse from shouting. Robert Miller, even more enraged, told the bodyguards to beat and kick Sarah Johnson. He wasn't satisfied and even kicked and stomped on her himself. I watched Sarah Johnson, her face pale, her head sweating, her eyes glazed. She had no strength to resist. Then, she fainted. Yep, she really fainted. That afternoon, Sarah Johnson died from miscarriage and bodily trauma after resuscitation efforts failed. David Miller, dragging his injured leg, rushed over when he heard the news and collapsed by her window, crying loudly. First he lost the child, then his wife. How tragic. I kindly told him that his father had accidentally killed his wife, telling him not to take it too hard. His eyes were bloodshot, veins bulging. Looks like there would be a show soon. I updated my friend on the current situation and asked her to keep an eye on David Miller. Sure enough, that guy was going to go after his father. He had planted a time bomb in Robert Miller's car. My friend asked what I wanted to do next. My gaze was cold. I told her Robert Miller obviously couldn't be allowed to remain, but he couldn't die yet. Severe injury would suffice. After all, the will hadn't been finalized yet. He couldn't just die. She quipped, "You're truly ruthless, no choice. A woman isn't stable without being ruthless." What I wanted was the entire Miller family fortune, not a single cent less. 1 minute before the car exploded, I called Robert Miller and told him David Miller had planted a bomb in the car, telling him to stop immediately and get out fast. Boom! On the other end of the line, there was an explosion. Robert Miller was rushed to the hospital, critically injured. I arrived shortly after. "Robert, how could this happen?" I grabbed his hand, sobbing uncontrollably. He gestured for the butler to come over and handed me a document. The word will was written prominently on it. "Olivia, I have to break my promise. I can't take care of you anymore. This is the only way I can compensate you." Then, he told me a big secret. David Miller was his ex-wife's alleged son. What? The Miller family had this kind of bombshell? So Robert Miller had been raising someone else's son all this time? How humiliating. He had been more than generous and righteous towards him, and he still wanted to harm him. Robert Miller's eyes were full of reluctance. He raised his hand, wanting to touch my face. Suddenly, his hand dropped. The heart monitor emitted a piercing sound. Several doctors rushed in and began working frantically. Ultimately, resuscitation efforts failed, and he was pronounced dead. With the butler's assistance, the funeral arrangements were made, and the property transfer went smoothly. I went to the detention center to visit David Miller. He was awaiting sentencing for suspected murder. Watching him yelp and bark like a dog was truly satisfying. "David Miller, look what I have here." I took out 3 documents and showed them to him one by one through the cell window. The first one, paternity test. It showed that he and Robert Miller were not related. Fake. This must be fake. Ignoring his roar, I picked up the second document. The will. It stated that upon Robert Miller's death, all assets under his name would be transferred to Olivia Davis. David Miller banged on the cell window. This is impossible. Finally, I told him about Robert Miller's death. David Miller, thank you for helping me get rid of your father. Otherwise, how could I have gotten all the assets into my hands? While they fought, I won everything. This broke David Miller. In an instant, his family, his fortune, he had destroyed it all himself. He threw down the phone and punched the glass wildly. The guards dragged him away. David Miller, I wanted to take everything from you. That night, the detention center called. David Miller had committed suicide. My target for revenge was dead, and I'd acquired a massive fortune. It couldn't have been more perfect. On the beaches of Maldives, I basked in the sun, enjoying the comfort of the clear blue sea and sky. I raised the champagne in my hand and clinked glasses with my friend across the distance. Cheers, cheers. In that moment, I was truly satisfied and had no regrets for the rest of my life. Ah, it feels so good to be rich.